Welcome to Veiled Narrative Stories, where emotions find their voice and every tale hides a truth beneath the surface. Tonight's story is one that begins in silence and ends with a heartbeat. The rain had begun as a whisper, soft, uncertain, as if the heavens themselves hesitated before weeping. By the time Lara reached the park, the drizzle had thickened into a steady fall, tracing glistening lines down the lampposts and turning the cobblestone paths into mirrors of trembling gold. She didn't care. Her heels clicked against the wet pavement in uneven rhythm, her breath visible in the chill. The city behind her glowed with the kind of beauty that only seems to mock a broken heart. Cafes buzzing with laughter, cars passing in blurred streaks of red and white, couples walking beneath shared umbrellas. Every sound reminded her of what she had lost. She found a bench beneath a great oak tree, its branches heavy with rain. The wood was damp and cold, but she sank into it as though surrendering to the night. Her fingers clutched the edge of her coat, though it did little to keep her warm. And then the tears came, quiet at first, then uncontrollable. The kind of tears that don't just fall, they ache. The kind that steal your breath and shake your shoulders. She had promised herself she wouldn't cry anymore. Not for him, not for anyone. But the heart has its own rebellion, and tonight, hers refused to obey. In her lap lay a letter, crumpled and damp at the edges. The ink had bled slightly, but she could still read the words that had undone her. "I'm sorry, Lara. I thought I was ready for forever, but I'm not. You deserve someone who is." That was all. No explanations, no closure. Just a few cowardly sentences that ended a love she had built her world around. The wind picked up, and with it came a shiver. Not just from the cold, but from the hollow space inside her chest. She lifted her eyes to the sky, watching raindrops fall through the yellow glow of the streetlight. Every drop felt like time, falling, breaking, disappearing. For a moment, she wished the world would stop spinning. Just for a breath. Just until the pain stopped burning so fiercely. The park was nearly empty. Only the sound of rain and the faint hum of distant traffic filled the air. Somewhere, a fountain overflowed with rainwater, its ripples catching reflections of the city lights like scattered jewels. She pressed her palms together, trying to feel warmth, trying to remind herself she was still here, still breathing, still whole, even if she didn't feel like it. The scent of wet earth mixed with the faint sweetness of night, blooming jasmine. It was a perfume of melancholy, intoxicating in its loneliness. She remembered how he used to say, "You look most beautiful in the rain." The thought twisted inside her, a cruel echo of tenderness that no longer belonged to her. Her mascara had long surrendered to the weather, black traces marking her cheeks like rivers of memory. But she didn't wipe them away. There was no one to impress, no image to maintain. Just a woman unraveling quietly beneath the indifferent sky. As the minutes bled into one another, the park seemed to fall into a different kind of silence. The kind that breathes, that listens. The kind that almost feels like it's holding you. The wind carried with it the faint sound of footsteps. She didn't notice at first, she was too lost in the rhythm of her own sorrow. But soon they drew closer, measured, steady, unhurried. Still, she didn't look up. Who would approach a woman crying alone in the rain at this hour? But the footsteps stopped, right beside her bench. For a heartbeat, the air felt different. Thicker somehow, as though charged with quiet awareness. Lara froze, the tears still clinging to her lashes. She didn't dare turn. Then, a low voice, warm, calm, and unexpectedly gentle, broke through the sound of the rain. "You'll catch a cold sitting like that." She blinked, startled, looking up for the first time. And there he was, an unfamiliar man standing under the dim glow of the lamp, holding a dark coat over one arm. His hair was damp, his shirt slightly soaked, but his expression carried none of the indifference she had grown used to. There was concern there, real concern. He wasn't handsome in the magazine way, but there was something about him, an ease, a quiet strength, that made her heart stutter. In that moment, she realized something almost terrifying: she wasn't invisible. Not tonight, not to him. The stranger stepped closer, the rain whispering between them like a secret. "Here," he said softly, extending his jacket. "You look like you need this more than I do." And though it was just fabric, just a gesture, it felt like a lifeline. The warmth of his coat settled around her shoulders, heavy and comforting. The faint scent of cedar and rain filled her lungs, grounding her. She wanted to thank him, to speak, but her voice betrayed her, caught somewhere between a sob and a whisper. He didn't press her to talk. He simply sat down beside her, close enough to share silence, far enough to offer safety. The rain began to ease, and the night seemed to exhale. For the first time in a long while, Lara didn't feel like she was falling apart. She felt seen, and perhaps in some quiet corner of the universe, fate smiled. Because sometimes the most extraordinary love stories begin not with fireworks, not with music, but with rain, a park bench, and a stranger who cared enough to stop. The rain had softened to a delicate mist, as if the sky had grown tired of crying. Drops still trembled on the ends of branches, falling now and then with the faintest sound, like the punctuation marks of silence. Lara sat motionless beneath the sheltering oak, her fingers still clutching the edges of the jacket that now wrapped around her shoulders. It was heavy, not just in weight, but in meaning. The fabric carried the faint scent of sandalwood and rain, mingled with something she couldn't quite name, a quiet strength, perhaps, or a trace of the man who had offered it. The warmth of it seeped slowly into her skin, as though it were erasing the chill that heartbreak had left behind. The stranger remained standing for a few moments, his gaze soft yet unreadable. He wasn't someone who filled silence with needless words. Instead, he simply was, solid calm, a presence that somehow commanded the space without asking for it. The lamplight behind him painted a halo around his frame, catching droplets in his hair that glittered like small stars before sliding down the collar of his coat. Finally, he spoke. "Do you mind if I sit?" His voice was deep, low, and rich, the kind of voice that could turn an ordinary question into an act of tenderness. Lara hesitated, caught off guard by his gentleness. She didn't trust easily anymore. Trust had betrayed her just hours ago. But something in his tone disarmed her defenses. She nodded. He took a seat at the far end of the bench, leaving a respectful space between them. For a long while, neither spoke. Only the rain dared to fill the gap, that and the faint rustle of leaves overhead. It was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of stillness that feels alive, heavy with the awareness of another soul beside you. Lara turned her gaze toward him, uncertain. He was older than her by a few years, perhaps early 30s. His jawline was traced with the shadow of a day's stubble, his hair damp and swept slightly to the side. He wasn't conventionally perfect. His features were strong rather than delicate. But there was an undeniable grace in the way he carried himself. The sort of grace that comes not from appearance, but from character. She wanted to thank him for the jacket, to explain that she was fine, to reclaim her composure. But the words refused to come. Instead, she found herself asking something she hadn't planned. "Why did you stop?" The question slipped out before she could catch it. He turned toward her, his eyes calm, steady. "Because you looked like you needed someone to notice." It wasn't flirtation. It wasn't pity. It was simply the truth, spoken gently. Lara's throat tightened. No one had said something so simple, so real, in what felt like forever. She looked away, blinking back the fresh tears that threatened to fall. He didn't move closer, didn't reach for her hand or offer empty comfort. He just sat there, present, grounded, patient. Somehow, that restraint was more powerful than any embrace could have been. Minutes passed, maybe longer. The sound of rain softened further until it was only a memory hanging in the air. Finally, she spoke again, her voice small and uncertain. "It's strange, I didn't think anyone would notice me tonight." He smiled faintly, the kind of smile that began in the eyes. "People see what they want to see. Most walk by. I used to, too." She turned toward him, curiosity cutting through her grief. "Used to." He looked out at the wet pathway ahead. "A few years ago I lost someone. I stopped seeing everything for a while, the world, people, myself. Then one day, someone stopped for me." Lara studied him silently. The sincerity in his tone felt like a balm against the raw edges of her pain. He wasn't trying to impress her. He was speaking from a place that knew what it meant to hurt and to heal. The park light flickered above them, and for a fleeting second, she saw the faintest reflection of herself in his gaze. Not broken, not fragile, but human. "Real," she whispered. "It hurts, doesn't it, when love leaves?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but it also teaches. Sometimes pain is just love's shadow, proof that it was real." Something shifted in her chest then, something small but undeniable. She wasn't healed, not yet. But for the first time that night, she wasn't drowning. His words had given her a piece of air. He stood, brushing rain from his sleeves. "You should go home soon. The cold gets worse after midnight." She hesitated, reluctant to lose this unexpected anchor in the storm. "Will I see you again?" He smiled, soft and mysterious. "The world is small when it wants to be. Then, without another word, he stepped away, into the mist, into the quiet. Lara watched as his silhouette faded down the path, the echo of his footsteps merging with the heartbeat of the rain. She pressed the collar of his jacket closer to her neck. The warmth lingered, carrying his presence like a promise, silent, steady, unforgettable. And as she sat there beneath the trembling light, she realized that maybe healing didn't always come from answers. Sometimes it came from strangers, from kindness with no expectation, from the miracle of being seen. The park no longer felt lonely. It felt like the beginning of something softly extraordinary. The next evening the city wore its usual disguise, glowing windows, humming streets, and people moving through the blur of life as though emotions were things to be tucked neatly away. But somewhere beneath the ordinary rhythm, something inside Lara had changed. She had woken that morning expecting to feel the same emptiness as before, the kind that pressed against her ribs and whispered that love was over. Yet, instead, there had been a strange calmness, a warmth she couldn't explain. Perhaps it was the jacket still draped across the chair by her bedside. She had kept it close all night. Its faint scent of cedar and rain a reminder of that moment in the park, that rare kindness from a stranger who had offered comfort without asking for anything in return. She couldn't remember the last time someone had simply seen her without wanting to fix her, claim her, or explain her pain away. And that thought lingered through the day like a quiet melody she couldn't forget. By late afternoon, she found herself back at the same park. Half out of longing, half out of something she refused to name. The rain had gone, leaving behind the soft scent of damp earth and the glimmer of sunlight spilling through the trees. She sat on the same bench. The wood had dried, but the memory hadn't. Her fingers brushed the smooth lining of his jacket, tracing the stitching, the texture. Each thread seemed to hold the echo of that night. She wasn't sure if he'd return. She didn't even know his name. But somehow, she wanted to believe that the universe wasn't cruel enough to let such a connection end with silence. As if in answer, a voice spoke behind her. "I was hoping I'd find you here." Her heart stilled. Slowly, she turned. He stood a few steps away, a faint smile tugging at his lips, his hands buried in the pockets of a new coat. The light framed him in gold this time, softer, warmer than the rain, lit glow of their first meeting. Lara's breath caught, not from surprise, but from the quiet recognition of something that already felt familiar. "You came back," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I told you," he said gently, taking a seat beside her. "The world is small when it wants to be." A laugh escaped her. Quiet, genuine, the kind that shakes loose a little sadness from the heart. It felt strange to laugh again. Beautifully strange. They sat for a while, the park around them alive with the murmurs of evening. Children chased after pigeons, couples strolled hand in hand, and the air carried the scent of coffee and blooming roses from the nearby cafe. For a long moment, neither spoke. But the silence between them wasn't empty this time. It was filled with an unspoken rhythm, the kind that only two souls who had both known pain could share. Finally, Lara said softly, "I never thanked you properly for the jacket." He shrugged lightly. "You don't have to. You looked cold. It was the only thing I could offer. And yet," she said, turning toward him, "it felt like more than that." He met her gaze then. A steady, quiet look that seemed to reach beyond words. "Sometimes," he said, "warmth isn't in the jacket. It's in knowing someone cared enough to give it." The air between them shifted. Subtly, delicately. Lara felt something in her chest unfold, a small flicker of light she hadn't felt in months. He glanced at the jacket resting on her lap. "May I?" She handed it to him, and as their fingers brushed, a faint spark pulsed in the space where skin met skin, that invisible thread that exists between strangers who aren't meant to be strangers for long. He held the jacket for a moment, his eyes tracing the damp patches where her tears had fallen the night before. "You cried a lot," he said softly, not as a question but as a memory he had quietly witnessed. Lara nodded. "I did." "Does it still hurt?" She hesitated. "Less today than yesterday," he smiled. "That's how healing begins, quietly, without asking permission." His words lingered like music, simple yet profound. Lara felt the weight of them settle somewhere deep within her. They began to talk then, not about love or loss, but about small things, books, coffee, the city, the kind of conversation that feels effortless, like stepping into a stream and letting the water carry you. Each word drew them closer, not in distance, but in understanding. Lara found herself laughing again, freely this time. Ethan, she learned his name at last, had a way of listening that made her feel like her words mattered. Like every thought, every story, was a thread being woven into something new between them. As twilight descended, the park lights blinked on one by one, their glow soft and golden. She noticed how the light touched his face, how it caught the corners of his smile and the depth in his eyes. And in that glow, she saw not a stranger, but something far rarer, a beginning. He looked at her, as though seeing the same realization flicker in her gaze. Maybe, he said quietly, the universe knows when two people need to find each other. Her lips curved into a soft smile. Or maybe it just rains for a reason. He laughed, low, warm, beautiful. And she couldn't help but join him. When they finally rose to leave, the night was painted in silver light. He offered to walk her home, and she didn't say no. And as they walked side by side down the narrow path lined with glistening trees, their hands brushed. Once, then again, until they didn't pull away. The connection between them was delicate, like a thread of silk. Fragile, yet strong enough to hold two hearts suspended in the wonder of something they both thought they'd forgotten how to feel. For the first time in a long while, Lara didn't feel like a story that had ended. She felt like one that had just begun. Winter deepened over the city like a velvet curtain trimmed with frost. The days grew shorter, the lights along the streets burned earlier, and the air carried that crisp perfume of pine and cold metal that announces December's arrival. For Lara, the passing weeks had blurred into something gently new. The pain that once defined her had softened, like a bruise fading under morning light. Each day brought a message from Ethan. A simple text, a photograph of the sky, a question that always felt like an invitation to breathe again. What had begun as a chance meeting beneath a trembling oak had turned into a quiet rhythm neither of them could deny. And yet, it was not his words that changed her most. It was the way he saw her. On one of those pale evenings, when the city shimmered beneath a fresh layer of snow, Ethan invited her back to the park. "I owe you a proper coffee," he had said with that familiar half-smile, the kind that could undo the chill from miles away. The park was transformed, every branch laced with silver frost, every path glittering under lamplight. Lara walked slowly, the soft crunch of snow beneath her boots keeping time with her heart. She spotted him near their bench, holding two paper cups that released thin clouds of steam. "You came," he said, a warmth in his eyes that matched the coffee he handed her. "Of course," she replied, smiling. "You still owe me a jacket. Remember?" He laughed, low and easy. "I think that one belongs to you now." They sat together again, but this time the air felt different. The park that once held her sorrow now held something luminous, as if the ground itself remembered that first night and wanted to rewrite it. Steam curled between them, mingling with the frosty air. Lara watched as flakes began to fall, each one landing softly on Ethan's dark hair before melting into tiny droplets that glistened under the light. "Do you ever think," she said quietly, "that maybe people meet exactly when they're meant to?" He considered the thought for a moment. "Sometimes," he answered. "Other times, I think we meet because we've finally become ready to be seen." She looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who carried his own collection of scars. Not all visible, but present in the way he listened, in the tenderness behind his words. "I used to think love was supposed to be loud," she admitted. "Grand gestures, promises, fireworks. But you make it feel calm." He turned to her then, his gaze steady. "That's because love isn't supposed to set you on fire, Lara. It's supposed to keep you warm." The world seemed to still around them. The falling snow slowed, the city's noise softened into a distant hum. She felt the truth of his words settle into her heart like a heartbeat that had finally found its rhythm. They talked about everything that evening, about dreams, regrets, music, the little things that make life bearable. With every story shared, another layer of distance melted away. Lara learned that Ethan painted in his spare time, though he'd never shown his work. He learned that she wrote poems she never let anyone read. It was as though they were trading pieces of themselves, each fragment finding its missing echo in the other. At one point, a gust of wind rushed through the park, scattering snow like silver dust. Ethan moved closer instinctively, shielding her with his arm. The movement was simple, but the nearness of him, the quiet steadiness of his breath, sent a shiver through her, not from cold, but from the fragile electricity of being truly alive again. When she looked up at him, their eyes met. A glance that lasted a moment too long to be accidental. His expression softened, and for the first time, Lara saw the vulnerability beneath his calm. "I don't want to rush this," he murmured. "I just want you to know I'm here. For however long you'll let me be." The honesty in his tone disarmed her. She didn't need the practiced lines or rehearsed promises she'd once believed in. This quiet truth was enough. She reached up and touched the collar of the jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. "Then stay," she whispered. He smiled, the kind of smile that glows without showing all its light. Slowly, he took her hand, tentative, respectful, and their fingers intertwined like a language both of them suddenly remembered how to speak. The warmth that passed between them wasn't just physical, it was something deeper. A recognition, a merging of silences that understood each other perfectly. For a while they simply sat there, hands joined, watching the snow descend around them in graceful silence. The lamplight turned each flake into a falling star, and the world felt hushed, almost sacred. Ethan broke the quiet with a soft chuckle. "You know," he said, "when I offered you my jacket that night, I didn't think I'd be here now, sitting with you, not wanting to leave." She turned to him, her eyes reflecting the lights of the city. "Maybe that's what kindness does," she said. "It finds its way back to you." And in that moment, with the world blanketed in white, their shared breath misting in the air between them, Lara felt something she hadn't dared to hope for. Peace. It wasn't the explosive kind of love sung about in songs or written in novels. It was quieter, steadier, more honest, the kind of love that wraps around you like a familiar coat and whispers, "You're home now." The jacket that had once been a symbol of sorrow had become something else entirely. A promise, a memory of warmth that no longer belonged to the rain, but to the two hearts who had found each other beneath it. And as they sat beneath the snowfall, the park became their sanctuary. A place where love no longer needed grand declarations, only the simple miracle of presence. Spring came quietly that year. The snow melted into memory, leaving behind small rivers of light that trickled through the streets. Trees wore their first blush of green, the air carried the perfume of renewal, and the park, their park, breathed again after its long winter sleep. Lara walked the familiar path one Saturday morning, sunlight streaming through the branches in warm, honey-colored beams. The world felt softer now, as though it had learned to smile again. And perhaps she thought, so had she. It had been months since that first night in the rain. The night a stranger had placed his jacket around her shoulders and unknowingly handed her back a piece of hope. In that time, what began as kindness had grown into something delicate yet profound, like the slow unfolding of petals after a storm. Ethan was waiting for her on the same bench where everything had started. The morning light painted his features in gold, and when he looked up, his smile carried that quiet steadiness that had always grounded her. "You're late," he teased, though his tone was more warmth than reproach. "I wanted to bring something," she replied, lifting a small brown parcel wrapped in twine. "A peace offering for making you wait." He raised an eyebrow as he untied it. Inside was a notebook, its leather cover etched with faint watermarks that looked almost like rain. "It's blank," she said. "I thought maybe we could fill it together. Your sketches, my words. Something that's ours." Ethan ran his fingers over the first page, reverent as though touching something sacred. "You realize this means you're stuck with me until we fill it completely." Lara smiled. "That's the plan." They sat side by side, the world humming quietly around them. A breeze rustled the leaves above, scattering tiny petals that drifted like white confetti through the air. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed, a dog barked in joyous rhythm. Life pulsed on, gentle and effortless. Ethan opened the notebook to its first page and drew a single line, a simple curve that resembled the outline of a jacket. He looked up at her and said, "This is where it began." She laughed softly. "And this," she said, placing her hand over his, "is where it continues." They spent the morning sketching and writing small fragments of memory. She described the rain that night, the way it had tasted of endings and beginnings. He drew the oak tree that had sheltered them, each stroke alive with tenderness. Slowly, the empty pages became a map of their shared story. When the sun climbed higher, Ethan leaned back, watching her as she wrote. "You know," he said, "you're not the same woman I met that night." Lara paused, her pen hovering above the page. "No." He shook his head. "That night you looked like someone who had forgotten her own light. Now," he reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "Now you glow." Her heart softened at his words, not because they were romantic, but because they were true. She had rediscovered herself, not through grand gestures, but through small, consistent kindnesses. Through mornings like this one, filled with quiet laughter and shared silences that felt like home. "I think you helped me remember," she whispered. Ethan smiled. "Maybe we reminded each other." For a moment they simply looked at one another, the kind of gaze that doesn't demand anything, only acknowledges what already exists. The space between them felt charged with every unspoken feeling: gratitude, affection, the gentle ache of something still growing. Then Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something folded and familiar. Lara blinked in surprise. It was the jacket. The same one from that rainy night. "You kept it?" she asked, her voice a soft blend of laughter and disbelief. "I told myself I'd return it once you didn't need it anymore," he said. "But I realized maybe it was never really mine to begin with." She took the jacket, running her fingers along the fabric. It still carried a faint trace of that first night's scent. Cedar, rain, and something distinctly him. Without a word, she draped it over her shoulders once again. "I think it fits better now," she murmured. He looked at her, eyes warm and bright. "Because it was always meant for you." A pause lingered between them, filled with all the things they didn't need to say. The air was thick with sunlight, with promise. Lara leaned closer, resting her head against his shoulder. "Do you ever think about how different everything could have been?" she asked softly. "All the time," he replied. "But then I remember. Every wrong turn, every heartbreak, every storm, it all led me here." She smiled against his sleeve. "To the park." "To you," he corrected. The words were quiet, but they carried the weight of truth. And in that stillness, surrounded by the soft rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind, Lara felt the world align, as if the universe itself had been holding its breath for this moment. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the sun and his presence melt into one feeling: safety. Not the kind born of control or certainty, but the kind that comes from being seen, completely and without condition. There, on that same bench where heartbreak had once broken her open, love had returned, not loud or dramatic, but tender and enduring. The park had witnessed both her ending and her beginning, the way rain gives life to flowers that bloom long after the storm. As the afternoon unfolded, they continued to write in their shared notebook, pages filling with dreams, sketches, and fragments of words that would one day tell the story of how two souls met on a night made of rain and second chances. And as they walked away hand in hand, leaving behind footprints on the path glimmering with light, the jacket swayed gently against her back, no longer a symbol of loneliness, but of love found in the simplest of moments. The world, it seemed, had kept its quiet promise that sometimes the most extraordinary beginnings hide inside the smallest acts of kindness. And so it was. She was crying alone in the park, until a stranger offered his jacket, and forever began. Sometimes the universe speaks in whispers, not in grand miracles, but in moments so small they could easily be missed. A stranger's quiet voice, a jacket offered beneath the rain, a pair of eyes that looked and truly saw. What began as a night of heartbreak for Lara became the first page of a story she never expected to write again. Ethan did not arrive to save her, he arrived to remind her that she was never beyond saving. He didn't fill the silence with promises, he simply stayed, and in that presence, warmth returned where sorrow had lived. Their love did not rush to declare itself. It bloomed the way dawn touches the horizon, slow, certain, inevitable. In him, Lara found not a replacement for the love she'd lost, but a reflection of everything she had rediscovered in herself: strength, gentleness, and the courage to begin again. And that is what love truly is. Not the thunder that breaks the sky, but the steady rain that heals the earth. The park, once a place of endings, became their sanctuary of beginnings. The same bench that had caught her tears now carried their laughter. The same jacket that had shielded her from the storm had become a symbol of what love should be: simple, selfless, enduring. Because sometimes, all it takes is one act of kindness to change the course of two lives. A single moment that rewrites everything that came before it. She had been crying alone in the park, lost beneath the weight of heartbreak, until a stranger offered his jacket, and with it, unknowingly offered her the warmth of forever.